quick thing here. If you are listening to this podcast and you are not in the Richmond area, right? You're not someone who can just kind of show up to an event and get to know us, maybe buy a ticket to something or take a class, anything like that. We could use your help because you're kind of like a member from afar, but we don't get to know you. And we could really use your support. So if you're not in the Richmond area and you like this podcast, I hope you'll give a donation. Thanks. I'm Rabbi Patrick, and welcome to Kehillah. Today we're going to talk about a free synagogue. Yeah, like free. And we're going to talk about the turn of the century, and we're going to talk about a man named Stephen Wise, and we're going to talk about some sociology of Jewish American life, and I'm going to talk to you about Kehillah and some stuff we need to think about for our future. So let's set our covenant together. Maybe you are on a bus and you're listening to this, or maybe you're cooking dinner and this is sort of the background music, or maybe in your retirement, you have decided to create an educational system for yourself between YouTube and podcasts and books, and maybe Kehillah has the honor of being part of that. Well, whatever it is, certainly appreciate it. And if you appreciate this, if this has been meaningful to you, I really hope you'll support us with a donation of some kind and let us know it's because of the podcast, right? That's a really important thing, because sometimes people will give a donation, for an event or something like that, and maybe they do really support that event and things, but there was something about the podcast in particular that inspired them. So let me know. Just send an email, rabbi@rabbipatrick.com. Let us know if this podcast is meaningful to you, the way that it is meaningful to us. So whatever your covenant are, whatever your intentions are, draw them into your heart. I have my Corinne Sachs Siddur, very lovingly worn, sitting next to me. It's on top of a book called The Anxious Generation. Shout out to Avi Remitz who let me borrow that book, although I now have to give him a copy. I have to buy a copy and give it to him because while I was on vacation, the cat chewed on the side of the book. So there you go. Avi gets a new book. So I pulled this and I just opened it just to see what would happen. And this is part of the Baruch. It's the blessings of the Shema. This is found in the Shachrit, the morning weekday service. At least that's the page I landed on. We do the Baruch in other contexts. But anyway, so this is the one for weekdays. Page 89. For those of you maybe have a copy, I'll get right to it. I'm going to read this part right down here. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or huvarei choshech osei shlom huvarei et hakol. Which means, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who forms light and creates darkness, makes peace, and creates all. So the Psuke de Zemra, as it says here, I'll just read this little commentary. This is a prelude to prayer. And so that's what you read sort of before this. And those are like the words of song, words of praise, maybe is actually a better way of describing it. And that's like the prelude. And then you do the Baruch, which is sort of the call to prayer. Right. So, like in Islam, you hear like Allahu Akbar and all of that over the minaret. This is our version of that. And then the congregational prayer here, the heart of which is the Shema. So this is listen, Israel, hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then the Amidah, named because it's Amad, it means to stand. Saying the Shema twice daily, morning and evening, is a biblical institution and was part of the order of service in the temple times. And in the morning, you can also say Modeh, which I do. I find it to be a very grounding way to open up my day. So, having set our covenant, we're going to switch to something completely different. We're going to talk about the free synagogue. But let's talk about our synagogue real quick first. So Friday, August 7th at 6 p.m., Shabbat service and dinner at Commonwealth Autism. Oh my goodness, that was so awesome. And I want to see everybody come. It was magical. It was magical. And, I have to say, I kind of have this pain in my heart a little bit because I'm always concerned that things will be novelties, right? Like we'll do something fun and interesting and engaging, and then once we've done it, it's like, oh, okay, well now you have to kind of up that. You got to come up with something different. You got to come up with something bigger. Like, can we have like bouncy castle this time, right? Like my orientation is towards that. And to be fair, in an attention economy, which is where we live now, right? The most valuable natural resource is your focus. It's more important than money. It's more important than things that you can get out of the earth. In fact, data is more valuable than all of the earth's resources combined if you monetize them. So I always get concerned that like we do something really cool and then it's like, oh, okay, well now are we going to do it on a boat? Are we going to do it on, so that's always my fear. So hopefully that's not the case. I don't think it will be. And I know where that comes from inside me. It's, my younger years when I was in bands and promoting parties and things like that. You always are trying to do something bigger, bigger, bigger. And my sermon, in fact, was about resisting that urge. So kind of a paradox there, right? Sometimes you just have to say the sermon that you need to hear. So I want you to come Friday, August 7th, 6 p.m. Shabbat service and dinner at Commonwealth Autism. Stephanie will be there, so you'll have a better tefillah leader than me. Also, Suzanne McEwen is going to be making the side dishes and salads. I just got an email from her. I will be on protein duty, and I would love your help. So free tickets for volunteers. That's how it works. If you could show up early and stay late, that would mean a lot. So free $20. Like, come on, man. So you can go on the website and you'll see a thing that's volunteer ticket. If you're interested in volunteering, just send me an email and I will give you the code to unlock a free ticket or two or whatever you need. We'd love to have you. A week later, August 14th, home hosted Shabbat at Joel's. I'm so excited. Yeah. So it's another adventure out here in suburbia, a little bit farther out, like maybe 5-10 minutes from me. But Joel is such an awesome guy. We're so excited to have him hosting. And then we got 2 weeks and we have Friday, August 28th, home hosted Shabbat at Natalie's, right? So you go all the way across the opposite side of the river, way up there over in that Glen Allen kind of area. So if you're more on that side, you might enjoy that more. If you're more on this side, you might enjoy Joel's. I think you should come to all three because like think about that like hits all locations, right? It's north, like kind of farther in west, and then you have us in Bon Air, which is a little more central, and then you have Joel over by Swift Creek. So there's a little something for everybody. Love to have you. It's all listed on the website, so make sure to grab it. Love to see you there. Free tickets if you need them. So speaking of free, can Judaism be free? So I want you to imagine walking into a synagogue, not Kehillah, like think of something else, like ChatGPT in your brain or Gemini or Nano Banana or whatever it's called, an image in your mind. You're walking into a synagogue, standard issue 1900 synagogue, right? And there's membership dues. And there's pews that have people's names on them, like family names. And in fact, in some of the places where you sit, you'll see a box and it'll actually have a person's name on a little brass plate. And if you open that box, it has like their tefillin and their prayer shawl and a siddur. Like it's like their reserved seat permanently, right? And there's an expectation that your financial contribution determines your place in the community. So maybe you could have a job called Parnasa, which is a work, basically, the person who pays for the rabbi, and you get to sit on the bima, right? You get to sit kind of right behind, and you get to watch the rabbi's backside, which I don't know why you would want that to be the best seat in the house, but I guess it is. Imagine all that. Or you can imagine the opposite. No membership dues, no reserved seating, right? No special expectations if you're someone who gives the most. Over a century ago, one of America's most influential rabbis believed that this is exactly how Judaism should work. So I'm going to tell you the story, sort of Rabbi Stephen Wise and the Free Synagogue Movement, and why, more than 100 years later, Kehillah has, in a sense, revived many of these ideas and has adapted them for a very new world. So we're going to talk about America's need for a different kind of synagogue. We're going to talk about this character named Stephen Wise. We're going to talk about what free actually means. And then we're going to talk a little bit about us and how we would definitely consider ourselves inheritors of this free synagogue tradition. So here we go. Since the turn of the 20th century, millions of Jews are immigrating to America, immigrating to other places too, but immigrating to America. So this is pre the state of Israel, right? America, Britain, that's where you go. Synagogues are financed through membership dues, so are mandatory fees. That's how you do it. So this can be a little confusing to people outside of the United States, especially where religious communities are considered like architecture, right? And you need to fund those. So I have a friend he used to live in Germany, and he said that his then partner had to choose on her tax form what religion she was, so that her like religion commitment, financially tax burden would go to that religion, right? You have recognized religious communities and unrecognized religious communities outside of the United States. And in America, it's different. It's this kind of free market type of thing. Certainly, you have dioceses and more centralized forms of religion. But for Jews, like, yeah, we have denominations, movements as we call them. But frankly, it's kind of stumping for yourself. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that you're not getting money from some outside source. I think sometimes people don't know the inside baseball of this stuff, that communities have to fundraise for themselves. It's a grassroots effort. Every synagogue is a startup in that way. So they have to pay for it somehow. So how do you do it? Well, you get donations. You charge membership dues. Maybe you give people the best seats in the house. By the way, the origin of having a really great cantor for Kol Nidre and having High Holidays tickets, that actually came about as a way to try to convince people to come to synagogue. Because the idea was like people weren't necessarily going to come for Yom Kippur. So you tried to find a better, like a better cantor, someone who had operatic training. And it's like, oh, well, of course you're going to come to Kol Nidre because, Shmuley Horowitz, or what, I just totally made that name up. Like that cantor is like a renowned cantor, and you're going to come see them. Kol Nidre, like real, really profound stuff. So of course you'd buy a ticket, right? Because you're already buying a ticket to the theater, and it's the same thing. Right. So there are all of these different ways that congregations had to make money. And the problem is that then created a sense that people were unequal within the community. It wasn't true everywhere, but it reflected a broader American pattern. Churches and synagogues alike often did things like this, and wealthier patrons were the ones who ended up having more access, including more access to the clergy. And it made community very inaccessible. So that's where a guy named Stephen Wise comes in. So Stephen Wise is born in 1874. And he was a nationally known Reform rabbi. He was a big social justice guy. He was also very controversial because he was a Zionist, which at the time is nothing like what we even talk about today. When people talk about sort of anti-Zionism at the turn of the century, it's not what any of this stuff is today. Or Zionism, for that matter. Completely different animal. So in 1905, he was invited to become the rabbi of Temple Emmanuel in New York. Huge synagogue still there. One of the most prestigious Reform congregations in America. Now, another piece of inside baseball that's kind of interesting is that if you look across America, I should say this is interesting to people like me. You're probably already bored out of your mind, but whatever. Usually there's these big anchor synagogues, huge buildings, huge number of rabbis, huge number of families, huge endowments, big family funds. And what you find actually is that those, and I'm making this number up, but let's say 10 huge communities really are what drive the direction of these movements. And so Temple Emmanuel, it's like Central Synagogue. It's like one of these really, really big ones, right? So he gets offered this job, and the negotiations kind of break down, and it doesn't work, and he decides to end his relationship there. Yeah, and the reason why is that the board wanted to hear his sermons or see his sermons before he gave them, right? They wanted that level of control. And it speaks to a question even today in Jewish life of who is really in charge of the synagogue, right? So is it the person in the pew or the seat or the whatever? Um, is it the board who's elected by that community to serve out the community's will? Is it the rabbi of that community who acts as the figurehead, or are they really in charge? Now, the reality is the role of rabbi in the United States is a very strange one because the community votes in the board votes for who gets to be the rabbi. But then when you look at a community is often whoever the rabbi is. Right? So, because people ask, well, who is the rabbi, right? They don't necessarily ask, like, who's the president? Or, well, who's the cantor? Or what's the religious school like? It always defaults to, well, who's the rabbi, right? How many people of other faith traditions leave that tradition, or maybe not the tradition, but leave the church or the mosque or whatever, because they don't like the pastor or they don't like the imam? So this is this common weird thing of there's this thing called the community, which is all the people who more or less participate, a board who participates more, and then the rabbi who's in charge, but then the community is in charge of deciding whether they have the rabbi, but then the rabbi's the representative of everybody. So it's a very unusual dynamic in that way, right? Like, how much authority do you invest in the rabbi? How much do you want them to do? How much do they represent you? And so you have these boards that would say, well, we're the ones in charge here, right? Like, you're a person we hire out to come work for us. So we want to see what you're going to talk about. So in a famous letter, Stephen Wise said, asked this question. He said, the pulpit shall be free, or whether it should not be. So for Wise, he's a rabbi who could not preach honestly and could not truly serve Judaism if he wasn't allowed to speak his mind, including on controversial issues related to what we now call civil rights, Zionism, all kinds of other things. So in 1907, he gets it in his mind to start something called the Free Synagogue. Now, the idea of free is a little bit different than maybe we think. Free in our minds usually means like there's just no cost. That's not what it is. It's freedom of the pulpit, right? Because the pulpit was the issue. You know, the board wanted to be able to look at his sermons and decide in advance whether they agree with them, right? It's freedom of conscience in that way, right? Like an ability to hold a tension of agreement and disagreement in a community. The pewless seating, in other words, meaning like you can't have like a family seat that only you are allowed to sit in. No compulsory dues. So you join and you give of your heart. Wanted to make sure that there was equality of men and women in participation. And it's a little different. It's not egalitarianism like we understand it today. But it's getting there. And of course, there's a commitment to social justice, which really mattered to Stephen Wise. So let's get into what free actually means. So free did not mean free from commitment, free from responsibility, free from financial support. Well, what it really meant was to be free from barriers, free from class distinction, freedom from censorship, right? Going back to the sermon thing. Freedom to belong by virtue of your presence before being asked to pay for it. And certainly there was no set amount you were supposed to pay for it in return for getting something, right? You just belong first. That's what it is. You just belong first. Give because you believe in the community and give as much as you can when you can. The Free Synagogue was described as free and democratic, pewless and dewless. I'm sure that that's a more modern take from Wikipedia or something, but I do think it's kind of clever, right? Free and democratic, pewless and dewless. Freedom of the pulpit. This was really the issue that launched it, right? It was freedom of speech. It wasn't about free synagogue. Oh, that means no money. And it's actually freedom of speech. Because Rabbi Wise believed that rabbis needed the freedom to preach comfortably without fear that they were going to lose their jobs because they would say things that maybe would be uncomfortable. So maybe that's MLK, or maybe that's, Eleanor Roosevelt or Desmond Tutu or whoever you want to bring on the bema, right? Maybe it's a different kind of sermon. Maybe it's something rabble rousing, right? You need that freedom, and you need to know that you can get off of the bema and your job wasn't on the line, right? Because of a belief that you have. And so that's what freedom of the pulpit was about, the ability to be trusted as a religious leader to go up on the bema and say the things that needed to be said without major repercussions to your life. One thing I love about this history is that it became more than just a prayer thing, right? Stephen Wise wasn't asking, how do we fill seats? And by the way, I should say the first service he ever did was at a theater. But the commitment to a just society, one that's better, led him to be involved in JIR, which is Jewish Institute of Religion. It combined with Hebrew Union College, American Jewish Congress, the NAACP. He was a leading voice for civil rights, for Zionism, for refugee advocacy and social justice, right? So the idea that a community is more than just where you go to pray, where you go for the bar mitzvah, right? Things like that, is that you worship with your full self, right? Both in your words of devotion, but in your acts of making the world better. And the interesting thing about this free synagogue movement is that there really are no sort of old school free synagogues anymore. The movement didn't necessarily disappear. It just evolved. It sort of became something that looks a little bit different. So, like, for example, there's the Free Synagogue of Flushing, right, which still remains active and is explicit in its, being rooted in all of these different kinds of things. But the thing is, most don't operate financially the way that Stephen Wise hoped, right? That people just gave whatever they wanted. Why? Because the world changed, right? You have buildings and insurance and schools and professional staff and programming. As congregations grow, stable membership income becomes essential, right? So the more people you have, the more you have to invest in them, which means they need to invest more in the community. And ironically, Stephen Wise's own congregation, years after he died, eventually built a permanent synagogue and has a traditional membership structure, even though it champions the beliefs of Stephen Wise and the Free Synagogue founding. So even though Stephen Wise's vision with a free synagogue movement in the Reform movement didn't quite pan out, perhaps the way he had hoped, there are groups like us who would probably describe ourselves as part of a free synagogue movement. We didn't recreate his synagogue. We did interpret it. So how did we do that? One is freedom of membership, right? You join the email list, you're a member. Right? We don't pay you to be you don't pay us rather to be on the email list. No mandatory dues. Instead we have life cycle fees, monthly giving, volunteer opportunities, right? Event tickets, obviously. And by the way, I say this all the time, event tickets that doesn't pay for anything. It really doesn't. We hopefully break even. That's what event tickets are about. If you look at what it actually takes to throw an event, even if you take into account the fundraising we do, that's part of making those things possible, does not pay for itself. Never would. We'd have to charge double the price because it doesn't take into account people's time. Life cycle's a little bit better, but then there's other things that we kind of do, again, all in service to not having mandatory dues. And that includes asking for a monthly gift of some kind. We have someone who gives $4. Right? That $4 is probably pretty meaningful to them. We have people who give a lot more. Again, that's probably pretty meaningful to them. Our members' generosity, and members, that's you, even if you're one of those people far away, listen to us right now. Our members' generosity makes all of this possible. And by the way, if you can't afford any of this stuff, right, like the event tickets, whatever, Kehillah Cares is going to cover it. So even in our system of tickets and fee-for-service, whatever, we still have your back. Now, let's talk about not just the sort of financial stuff. Let's talk about what it means to actually be a community. So this is where freedom of conscience comes in. And freedom of conscience, I think, then leads to freedom of pulpit, not the other way around. that people disagree. They disagree religiously, politically, socially. I'm okay with that. Judaism has always been a civilization of argument, so why have hegemony, right? Like why say, oh, we're all about the interpretive tradition and we're all about people like coming to their own conclusions, all these other things. But then when you have people who disagree in a community, oh, well, someone has to be right and wrong, and let's get like a protest sign out, right? Let's put a button on our chest because we're mad, right? No, no. Our job isn't to eliminate disagreement. It isn't to say, let's disagree, then let's come up with the majority says, and then let's kick everybody out because, oh, we don't like them. Come on. Our job isn't to eliminate that disagreement. It's to disagree well, machlochet, right? We talk about this stuff, like how to disagree in a civilized and honorable way. And my take, going a little off script right now, is that this ability to disagree and to disagree passionately, but to understand that the other person isn't a monster and to understand that not everything is a zero-sum game, and that at the end of the day, we can recognize the 5% or 10% of what someone is saying that could be true, even if we disagree with the 90 and vice versa. And by the way, that 10% here and that 10% there that we can agree on, well, that's what we need to be doing. Right? We need to be in that 20% zone. Yeah, we're not good at that as a society. We've lost that art. But anyway. So our job, I think, as a community is to find ways to hold tension. And in an ability to hold tension, it means we diffuse it, right? That you can have someone who votes one way and someone who votes another way, and they're both in the kitchen together listening to music while we make Shabbat dinner, right? Or that you can have someone who passionately disagrees with the way another person lives and will also be the first to give a donation when their family needs help, right? Now, the thing about it is, if you were just truly in it for making money, if you were truly in it for building a huge building, if you were truly in it for being famous, you would not do this. Right? You wouldn't do this. What you would do is you would say, this is our lane. This is our zone. This is our tribe. By the way, it's the best tribe. It's the only tribe you should belong to. All other tribes are wrong, narrow-minded, too open-minded, fill in the blank. And everyone else just has to go away. And it would be even better if they tried to come in and we kicked them out so we could feel that like pushing back, right? And we would just be known as like a brand, right? And boy, you got your social media game going on every time this issue comes up or this politician says something, this whatever, right? Like you just boom, 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 and that's where the real money is, right? The real money today, right? From donors, like big donors, is disagreement and hostility and agendas, and it doesn't matter what side. But that's just the way it is. There will always be, I don't know how to say this exactly. There will always be a large amount of inertia when the premise of what you do is we're right, you're wrong, our God is better than your God, and by the way, we're going to beat you up. That's always the way it's going to be. So if you're a community like Kehillah that holds this tension, and also at the same time diffuses it and comes out of that with love and trust and fidelity, and is interested in a just society, right? That's involved in social action. So not just like, oh, let's share something on Instagram or go to some meeting somewhere. It's like, no, like we will physically give money to people, right? Who are hungry. Right? We will make sure that someone gets a home, gets a social worker, gets therapy, that if a kid needs tutoring, we got it, right? We will do that, and we will do that for ourselves, right? A person who thinks of themselves as very far to the left of our politics is giving money to help, support the grocery needs of someone who thinks of themselves on the far right or whatever. I'm making the scenario up, but you get it. Freedom of conscience. Everyone has a right to believe the thing they want to believe, and everyone has a responsibility to contribute to the well-being of everybody else. So from freedom of conscience becomes freedom of the pulpit, right? Because if we're all allowed to have freedom of conscience, that includes yours truly. And that means that sometimes I might preach something that you disagree with, right? Every once in a while, I think it was Stephanie said to me, this was years ago. She said, every once in a while you need to do a sermon people don't like. I remember one sermon I gave. Oh God, it's so long ago. I gave this sermon where I don't even remember what the parsha was, but I was talking about social media. No surprise, right? And I said, the problem we have today is that we have confused individuals and brands, right? Like, I'd probably say Kim Kardashian at the time, is Kim Kardashian a person or a business, right? I think she's a person who runs a business. I don't think she is a business. She's a person who runs a business. Whole Foods, is Whole Foods a person? No, it's a business, right? Um, and I think in the age of content creation and brands and sort of marketing that's on just almost like a biological scale, we forget that, right? We see images on the internet, like, dislike, comment, right? But these are people. And a company's not a person. Sorry, controversial idea. A company's not a person. And so I gave this speech and I said, look, you're a person, you're not a brand, and brands aren't people. And something about that just like didn't work for a couple of people, and we didn't see them. One of them just like totally left, and then another one we only see every now and then. Yeah, I don't know, but sometimes you have to do that, right? And maybe it wasn't that sermon that did it. Who knows? It could have been anything else. But that's the thing, right? Like, sometimes you have to say things that people don't want to hear, because that's the gig. That's being a religious leader, and to me, that's very healthy for Judaism. So, getting us towards the end here, the challenge, this model is harder, right? Because we're not bound to a particular ideology. We're an open tent. Every month starts at zero, right? So we have little like accounting software, and we have a bank accounts, obviously, and you can go and you can see, right? Like how much money came in and whatever. Every month starts at zero, right? Like day one of every month, that's at zero. There's no guaranteed membership income. Every Shabbat, every class, every holiday, this podcast, every relationship has to matter enough that people choose to participate. And I actually think that that's very healthy, because it forces us to ask, are we creating something people genuinely want? And are we being genuine? Right? America's experiencing loneliness, a decline in institutional trust, declining religious affiliation. By the way, I have like a whole podcast episode I'm going to do about the decline of life cycle. Like, what happens when we have fewer Jewish weddings, and certainly even fewer baby namings, and all that's left are Jewish funerals, right? That's going to be a problem one day. Maybe people haven't stopped wanting community, though, right? Like, I go online and there's all this like, join the community, right? People want community, but maybe they're looking for a different kind of community. One where belonging becomes more important than bureaucracy, and where relationships matter more than membership cards, and where generosity grows from gratitude instead of obligation. Because think about it, you're a member. What are we going to do? We're going to hand you a hot towel when you come in, right? Is there like a Peloton in the corner? No, come on. Stephen Wise imagined a synagogue where people belonged because they believed in the mission, and that's what we're about. And a synagogue where rabbis spoke honestly, and I certainly do. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. You never have to think with me that this is like some kind of marketing trick, or that this is some kind of, Joel Osteen inspirational, give your donations now, whatever. Nah, I'm not that guy. If I were that guy, I would, I don't know what my life would look like, but it wouldn't be this one. But I'm honest always, and I want you to be too, and I want your conscience to be protected. And where, social action isn't just like this optional committee, right? It's a part of our DNA. Kehillah isn't a perfect representation of what Stephen Wise was trying to do, because guess what? That was over 100 years ago. But a community that's not built on dues, but is built on dignity, not on obligation, but relationship, and not on transactions, but on trust. That's Kehillah. Hebrew word for community. a community where everyone hears the same message. And I hope you hear it enough too. And that message is that you matter. So I hope you'll support the community. I hope you'll come to these 3 Shabbat events. This is going to be really cool. 2 home hosted, 1 at Commonwealth Autism and friends. Okay. We need to talk about it. You know, it's going to happen soon. We've got high holidays to be thinking about. We need someone to read Torah for Yom Kippur. I'll teach you. Like, no big deal. Like, we got this. And we need people to help with food and beverage for breakfast, and we need people to help with the Rosh Hashanah booth at Pride, which is going to be really cool. You know, I haven't even announced that. We haven't even put out an email or anything about that yet, because we know if we do, like, it'll be too early and everyone would be so mad. So I'm holding back. I'm holding back as best as I can. I get so excited about this stuff, and then I have to remind myself, do not tell people things 2 months in advance, right? They will get so mad, and they'll feel like they're being like strong armed, and it doesn't work anyway because everyone RSVPs at the last second. But anyway. So we just have so many opportunities to volunteer. Just reach out to me, please. Just rabbi@rabbipatrick.com. If you're interested, we will send you to the correct person and all of that stuff. If it's not me, it's Edva or it's Leslie or it's any other number of people who are involved in all the different things we're doing. So love to have your help. Social circles, build friendships. We have lots of those at Kehillah, and we need more of them. So do you have a hobby? Do you have an interest? Are you part of a demographic? You want to get together with other people? It's not a programmed thing. For example, we just had a family gathering. Shout out to Anne-Marie and Kira for putting that together, right? Out here in Midlothian, getting some Jewish families together just to hang out for a couple hours on a Sunday, right? Like, no big deal. Maybe these are the kinds of things you would like to be involved in. You know the drill. Send me an email, rabbi@rabbipatrick.com, and to our friends from far away, because I know there's a lot of people from far away who are listening to our stuff. We need your support. Because, like, we don't have, like, a far away Kehillah, right? Like, we don't have a Kehillah in Bolivia, right? But there's people in Bolivia listening to us. We don't have a Kehillah in Canada, but I know there's people in Canada who are listening to us. Matter of fact, I think it'd be fun. Let's just, like, real quick. I know I probably should be ending this by now, but let's just, like, real quick look at some of this stuff, because it's just mind-boggling, right? Locations. Here we go. How about all episodes? Okay. So, like, 12% of the listens have been in Europe, right? 7% in Asia. We got some Oceania, some people in Oceania. We got South America. Hey, Canadian friends, right? Love to hear from you. Some people from Frankfurt, from Ontario, right? From New York, from Holland, Brazil, all kinds of people. Yeah, all of you people who aren't part of the sort of Richmond-ish area. Yeah, we want to hear from you. And yeah, like, most people are Richmond, Midlothian, Henrico, right? But, if you're out there in Virginia Beach, I'd love to hear from you. I know there's no Virginia Beach Kehillah, or New York for that matter. You have every Jewish option in the world. You're listening to us. How about that? Right? New Jersey, California, Pennsylvania. Love to hear from you and love to have your support. It would mean a lot to us. So send an email, rabbi@rabbipatrick.com. You can give a donation in the show notes. That's all the weird little links that are below the thing that you're listening to this on. And again, remember, you matter. Let's talk about neuro-inclusivity in the workplace. I'll admit I don't know much about that, but our friends at Commonwealth Autism certainly do. So August and October and January, all kinds of dates to learn about neuro-inclusivity and autism in the workplace. This is a foundational training that introduces autism, neurodiversity, and neuro-inclusivity. Participants will learn about autism and common characteristics of autism, the meaning of neuro-inclusivity and how it applies to the workplace, the difference between accommodation and universal design, strategies that support neurodivergent employees and create an inclusive workplace, tips for clear communication, as well as do's and don'ts for working with someone who is autistic. So this is really great. It's a free training. I highly recommend you participate in it. We want to help our friends at Commonwealth Autism by supporting the different outreach opportunities they provide. Also, highly recommend Good Foods Grocery. Great place to support. You pick up a few things. It's over by Trader Joe's. So you know how like sometimes Trader Joe's doesn't have that one thing that you wanted, right? So why don't you go over to Good Foods Grocery instead? So, July 23rd, join us for a fun-filled read-along and craft day designed especially for children ages 3 to 7. Kids will get creative making their very own paper mouse ears before all the little mouses get to read along to the classic If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. You also get a sweet treat from a local vendor, The Baking Agent, and I certainly hope that you can join them. That's July 23rd, 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. over at Good Foods Grocery, again, right over there by Trader Joe's in Bon Air. Love to have you there. You can just go on the website, and there's also links in the show notes here for getting involved with Commonwealth Autism. Great group. Thank you so much, Commonwealth Autism, for being so supportive of Kehillah and giving us a home.